right, folks, welcome to the Tech Town Square. What is happening? Good evening to all of those tuning in on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to our show right now. Welcome. Eddie, how are you doing, my good friend?
Fantastic, James. Good to see you again. Another week. I tell you, it seems like a month's worth of work gets done every single week, and a month's worth of news gets done every single hour. We got a lot to talk about today, James. There's going to be some tech censorship talk, but you brought up a great topic in our preamble. Tell the audience what you want to talk about today.
So we're not going to recycle the same old tech censorship. Should they? Shouldn't have they? All that good stuff. We're going to talk about something I've been researching and spending the last few days on, which is deepfakes. On non-popular, non-traditional platforms targeting a specific audience, and some of the statements that we've seen today that address something that has to do with just that. So it's a very, very interesting topic. It's something that people weren't really thinking about. It's stuff that a lot of people haven't really taken into consideration. I know a few very smart people that have. So today's show, open forum. If you're on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, you can comment. We'll see your comments. We'll address your questions. This is a town square, folks. So the idea is you're not here to just listen to Eddie and I. We want to hear your opinions, your ideas, the way you see things in a respectable debate manner. If you name call, we kind of lose point of a debate. So the concept is let's share ideas and let the best idea win. And I know that's weird to say at a time like this, but it's not that weird, folks. So it's just part of the debate between folks. So for those tuning in live, thanks so much for being a part. Make sure to subscribe. Also, the show is done every single week, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So Eddie, I'll hand it over to you. Let's give them a little recap of last week and what we got in store for this week.
Yeah, actually, what's in store for this week and a little teaser for next week. You know, we wanted to maybe float this one across today. It's a big subject, though. There's a headline in businessinsider.com from a few hours ago. Online scammers are trying to sell COVID-19 vaccines on the dark web for as much as 1,000 in Bitcoin. Now, in my day job, and by the way, we should throw our disclaimer out at some point, James. I didn't print it up and get it in front of me. In my day job, what some of my researchers did is they paid on the dark web on purpose $750 worth of Bitcoin to a scammer to buy the COVID vaccine. Now, this is what we know so far. So far, we know that it's the Chinese version of the vaccine, which is 50% effective to what I've read so far. We paid this person $750 to see what would happen. This person disappeared immediately. Now, it begs the question, what's going on out there with this kind of stuff? And, it's about picking on those who are most vulnerable. Right? People who are genuinely afraid of COVID. And, maybe we'll spend 2 minutes on this because for someone like myself, I need to purposefully put empathy out there for those that are truly afraid of this disease, because I've looked at the data and I myself, as a 48-year-old healthy man who goes and works out all the time with a young family, I am not concerned, right? For myself and my young family, that's all I'm speaking about right now, right? I am concerned that if I pick up the virus and give it to somebody who's infirmed, somebody who's senior, somebody who should be taking this virus very, very seriously, that would be my only real concern about the virus for me. So I start to think, okay, well, there are people who genuinely are at risk. And then there are those that are just paralyzed in fear about this thing. The frenzy, the hysteria that media and society has whipped up from this dreadful year that we just experienced in 2020. And I think probably for the next 6, 9, maybe even 10 months, we'll continue to experience this year. It is very real. It is very scary. And those are people, when you're desperate, you'll do anything. I remember years ago, actually, my third daughter, she had a respiratory illness when she was about 8 months old. And she was in hospital in ICU for 5 days. I know what desperation feels like. And when you're desperate like that, you start praying, you start doing anything, right, to just make my loved one healthy. These are the people that are being victimized by awful, evil, nasty human beings from around the world who either get hold of a legitimate vaccine from China, and there's a good question. I want to research this, which is why I want to talk about it next week. How are they able to get hold of that? Be it very difficult to pick up the Pfizer vaccine, for example, right, off of Pfizer, for example, and some of the other ones out here in the West. So number one, how are they getting hold of them? I'm a little suspicious of what the Chinese government might be doing there, or the payoffs that people might be receiving to get that vaccine into the black market. And also the scammers who are just saying, hey, this is just, sugar water, and selling that for $1,000 worth of Bitcoin. So I also want to come up with a plan, maybe some best practices to help people who are feeling in that vulnerable state, so that they might be able to quickly test the market, test what they are looking at when they're being told you can jump the queue and you can get this vaccine. So that'll be up for next week. Last week, we talked a lot about tech censorship. It was, of course, right off of the back of the January 6th disruptions at the Capitol. So that, of course, I think dominated most podcasts in North America, even the world, most certainly. We had even today, I got a text, and it's funny you say, James, as soon as we hear name calling, yeah, we're not into that. So I had a bunch of name calling over text. These are so-called friends of mine. And it reminds me of Margaret Thatcher's quote. She said, as soon as they go personal, you've won the debate. As soon as somebody starts name calling, you've won the debate. But this person was, there's a coup going on in the United States. This person's outside of the US. And I said, really, a guy in horns, in Viking horns, taking selfies? If it was a coup, and think about this, there are something like 450 million handguns in the United States of America. If it was a coup, there would have been a lot of guns, tanks, right? You would have military personnel. That's a coup. Ladies and gentlemen, we did not experience a coup. We experienced more than disruption, however. And with sensitivity to that, we covered that subject matter. And there you go, James. What else?
So I loved it. Yeah, last week was a difficult week. I think the media tends to overstate stuff, and there's been an unintended consequence of tech censorship. And let's dig right into this. I'm going to present my idea. I'm going to present what I feel tech censorship has done given the advancement of technology today. So here's what tech has done. By censoring a lot of voices and sending these people to other platforms like Signal and Telegram and Parler, and not that those platforms aren't good, right? I'm not disparaging those platforms. I am personally quit Twitter on Friday or Saturday. I can't be happier as a human being.
So did I. How about that, buddy? So did I. I actually deleted my account. Like, I deleted it, deleted the app, done.
I deleted the account. The only account that is still existing for me on Twitter is the CyberHub podcast account.
Same for me. My professional account stays.
That has automated postings. It just posts.
Communication, right?
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Nothing else. I've been off of WhatsApp now for 24 hours. That's been kind of exciting. I'm on Signal and Telegram, and I've been on Signal and Telegram for a while. So here's what I'm going to say, folks. In Telegram, for those who don't know, who've never used the app, you go up to the search, and you can search and join all kinds of different groups. You can go and you can search CyberHub Podcast, and I've got a group on Telegram, and you can join the group on Telegram. And you can search Trump, you can search Obama, you can search Clinton, and you'll find different groups. And so since the tech purge, a lot of people, I think Telegram got like 50 million new users in the last week. Signal got they're getting like 3.5 or 3.6 million users a day.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I don't know what those numbers are, but I'm really curious to see it. And in those groups, I saw something being shared today on Telegram through different channels, and it was a statement by it's an alleged statement by the president that seems to be on authentic White House paperback that says that I've invoked the Insurrection Act and all kinds of stuff. And then there's a video that was kind of being distributed that showed allegedly the sitting president of the United States talking about a big surprise coming in the next few days. And people were believing it. Now, people were believing it because it seemed to come from authentic places. And when you join a new platform, you don't quite know the rules. See, we know on Twitter, a blue check mark means this person's been authenticated. We know on Facebook, you know, if it's a public page, that public page has been authenticated. Well, if you've noticed today, there were multiple statements released by the White House, essentially saying no to violence. Like, no one, like, seriously, like, don't go out, don't go to the Capitol. Like, that's it, it's over, right? Like, but why? So by essentially cutting the president off and sending all the people that followed the president to all these different platforms, now they're being given a lot more information. And a lot of that information is false. And not that social media needed to regulate that information, but, you know, you had at least a different group of people and they're reporting it, right? So if you and I saw something on Twitter and it was false, we'd report it. And there'd be a chance for people to take it down or stop its distribution, you know, but here there's none of that. So it's really raw, and it's a lot of mis and disinformation using deep fakes, using all kinds of fakes, right? From documentation fakes to fake posts to all kinds of fake stuff. And people believe it. And so this is the unintended consequence of what's going on right now. And what it's done is it's divided the camps. Cool kids here, weird, you know, other kids over there. You're in your echo chamber. You're perfect. You're beautiful. You're everything. And these guys, they're, you know, we're being screwed. We're going to take it back, and we're going to do all this stuff. And it's getting fueled even more. And I think that's the unintended consequence of what's been happening over the last 5 days. So I'll open this up for comments, for questions. Eddie, I'd love to hear what you think about this as well.
In 2019, I read The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. So for those that aren't familiar with the work, in a nutshell, and you can't really put it in a nutshell, it's a doorstopper of a book. It's over 1,000 pages. But Alexander Solzhenitsyn was part of the Soviet army in Second World War. He was a captain in their military. And after successfully, I'm not sure if he got all the way to Berlin, but after successfully pushing the Third Reich back into their territory and having simply seen the Western world, Stalin was so paranoid as a leader that he imprisoned those soldiers, right? those officers, because they'd seen the Western world. They've seen what it could be like there. And so for his bravery, for the fact that he did everything right for the motherland of Russia, he got sent to the Siberian death camps. Now, he survived. He spent, I think, and these are all on trumped up charges, the way they did this in these, what do they call those courts? You know, the bogus courts, basically, which they still actually have in Russia today. And he spent, I think, a good 20, 30 years in those camps, came out, obviously more than disillusioned with Russia, Mother Russia, so moved to the United States of America. And in the late 70s, I believe it was, might have been the early 80s, published a book called The Gulag Archipelago, and it was about his stories in the death camps. Now, what's interesting about this is the people, the guards that were used to guard him and others within the death camps were other people who had also been wrongfully imprisoned. It was a real head-scratching moment for me, because surely your fellow prisoners would be compatriots. Surely the psychology of that would bond you against Stalin and against the government. But in actual fact, a select few people, quite a few, became guardsmen and ill-treated. I mean, cannibalism. This is how bad it got in the gulags. I mean, it's a horrific read. If you can come out of that thing still sane and still thinking that the human race is a beautiful thing, which I do, it's a tough work. And he's the man that's credited with understanding that, there's a quote, good and evil runs down the heart of every human. Right? It's not about left versus right, Democrat, Republican. It's not about good kids, bad kids. Just reread Lord of the Flies. We have I'll just say a base primate nature. And unless we can fortify ourselves against that, people will behave poorly. Now, that's an extreme example, but I wanted to use it as a basis for this observation of what you just said, James, which is that never before in history have a group of private individuals been given the ability to have the power over others who have power, namely the President of the United States. Think of him as you will, doesn't matter. This is the President of the United States. There's 74 million Americans that would like him to be, and certainly is for the next few weeks. And yet, a small group, like Twitter's 5,000 employees. I think it's quite a small company. And I bet you within that small company, it's a tiny group of people who were itching at a reason to be able to lord power over those that they feel have power over them. And it's quite an irony in this particular case. It's not nearly as debased as what happened to Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag, simply because the reality, when I ask people, tell me, there's so much hysteria over politics, isn't there? Whether it's Biden or Trump, but Trump obviously had a lot more hysteria than I think certainly any other presidents I can remember in my lifetime. And when I ask people, what's actually happened to you in the last 4 years that's so bad? Like specifically you? Very little answer. There's not a lot of strength in the answers from that if we think about it. So here we have a small group of people that have the ability to have power, and they took it. Now, who's that guy that said power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely? Yeah, exactly. Power has corrupted, and it's corrupted so much so that a large group of people who, let's say, are the ones that are in hysteria over the last 4 years are like, yeah, that's good. Yeah, shut him up. Well, really? There's real problems here. Number one, the only reason why you're saying shut him up is because it's not your guy. If your guy was being shut up, you wouldn't like that. But also, can you imagine now, the incoming president and vice president, the politicians that are going up for their next terms, how obedient to Twitter do you think they're going to be, knowing that they can be cut off at any time and that Twitter did actually have the balls to do that? This is not a good place. This was a very bad move.
So the timing of Twitter is very interesting. And I don't want to go down the text censorship route. I think it's been so overdone. But just so people kind of understand, the timing from Twitter is a little suspicious. They kind of banned him after January 6th when they knew that the Democrats had control, at least of all three branches of government for the time being. There's been a bunch of information that's being shared today that I saw of political contributions by company in Silicon Valley. And I think Twitter, like 97% of the people that work at Twitter donated to the Democratic Party. So you kind of get that, this could be a match. And there's a bunch of people who worked for big tech that are now working in the incoming administration. So you got to, you got to wonder where that goes. I think the impact on social media, by the way, won't be in the US, at least not for the next few years. Where we're seeing it, though, is everywhere else in the world. So Angela Merkel is looking at this in Germany, and she came out today and she said, we're looking at ways to limit what Twitter can and can't do in Germany. The UK is doing the same thing. So we're seeing this come in Europe. We're seeing this also being done in other democracies in Japan and other places around the world as well, where now they're looking at big tech and they're saying, hey, these guys deplatformed it. Well, we're not waiting for it to happen here. If they could deplatform the sitting president, they could do whatever they want here. So now we're going to legislature and we're going to enact rules against these companies to limit what they can and can't do on their platforms in our countries anymore. And that's inherently going to impact them financially, right? Because they're going to have to spend more money and they're going to have to spend all kinds of different things because of that. So there's a few in like so there's a few things that we saw. There's a few things that we saw over the last few days that have become very, very real. So one is because people have gone through and people have left mainstream social media because they can't hear from the person who they followed and they're going to other channels. There are threat actors there now, that could be Russian, Chinese, Iranians that are spreading disinformation and misinformation towards those people. Okay. Right. I want to get to some comments here. Patrick, good evening. How you doing, buddy? So propaganda is a powerful tool. We saw that in World War II, and somewhere some people think it's up to them to curtail it as much as possible. How do we identify it? Whose truth is true? Authoritarianism seems to leak into private industry as well. Very, very, very true, Patrick, I'm sorry. Very, very, very true. So here's the deal about the truth. There is no such thing as a complete truth. In the aspect of what you believe and what I believe doesn't necessarily need to be the same truth, but there's an aspect of letting the whole idea of this show is the town square, and the whole purpose of the town square early on and what this nation was founded on was I can come with my idea, you can come with your idea, we'll debate it, and let the best idea in the town square win. The people will support the best idea that comes out there. So we're seeing the same thing now, only now we're not allowing ideas to roll through. So yes, there's always propaganda, there's always dis and misinformation. Before the internet, the propaganda though didn't exist because we had a free and empowered press. And in the era of internet, in the era of social media, and in the era of clickbait, what we're seeing right now, the media has lost all of its credibility. And I mean all media.
Do you think but do you also, you see, I hear that a lot, and I would love it if that were true because I'm slightly enraged by them, but they're still on, right? And I still think they get millions of people watching them. So this is an issue for us, right? Can I be slightly rude? The sheeple will still follow, right? So
there's. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. So I'm just wondering what to do about that. And by the way, for the audience, when I was typing earlier, I was trying to check to see Twitter's revenue stream from the US compared to international. We'll get to that. And then perhaps what I'll do is I'll look up, let's say, CNN and Fox's revenue stream or current viewerships. But it's still in the millions, right, James? So is it true that, they're losing the credibility?
So it's not true. I mean, the best show, I think, on CNN gets like 700,000 viewers.
Really? Is that it?
Yeah.
Wow, man. Okay.
And by the way, there's great news for those that are going back to traveling. As of March, you'll no longer see CNN at airports.
Why is that?
So CNN pays to be at airports.
Yeah, I was wondering why they were always on the blooming airport channels. Okay,
so they're not going to be at the airport anymore.
So they're hurting.
Yeah, but they're transitioning into big tech. So what's going on is these big media, mainstream media, are essentially going to Facebook and Twitter, and they're saying, it used to be the press where you had domination and distribution, right? So the New York Times became the New York Times because it had really wide distribution, right? You could get a New York's Times in New York or in Los Angeles, and it'd be the same New York Times because they had the distribution. So now these companies are trying to think of how can they get exclusive distribution through maybe lobbying Congress and the Senate to pass a law to only allow specific creators to post stuff along the news, which would be a very, very extremely dangerous thing because it would eliminate.
Let them fall and die, man. Yeah, we mustn't prop them up. Yeah.
Patriots of 1776 say India's parliament is also looking at this. I also know that to be true, that India is also looking at curtailing it. And in India, the problem, by the way, folks, is 10 times harder than it is here. So here, you and I know that we can go to different browsers and we can use a Google search to find the news and whatnot. In India, 1.2 billion people, technologically advanced in terms of education, but not in terms of technology, right? So the average human that's introduced to his first smartphone, the 2 or 3 apps that they know And the first app that they get, where the guy who sells them the phone says, here you go, you're ready to go. And by the way, click on Facebook. That's how you get to the internet.
Did Facebook set that up, by the way, do you think, or did they just evolve that way, right? Because this is a good app, it works.
I don't have the history to give you an educated answer on it. I would guess that Facebook became so widely popular and everyone was, are you on Facebook? Are you on Facebook? Are you on Facebook? That when you go to buy a phone and you want a smartphone with the Facebook app, so you can be on Facebook because you don't have a computer.
Plus it works. It is a slick app. I mean, look, they put all the engineering into it, so it's an amazing app from a functionality standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what we're seeing though now is the idea of propaganda and disinformation, and Patrick brought it up, and it's how do you identify it? Well, I don't think we need to identify it. I think we need to let the ideas be debated. And the challenge we have right now is we've become so polarized with ideas. We're in these echo chambers. I say it all the time, and I'm in cyber. And when we talk, tomorrow morning we do CISO Thursdays, right? With shout out to Renee and Chris and Naomi and all those great folks that tune in. And Patrick's also one of the regular contributors on our CISO Thursdays. I say, great, we're all talking in the echo chamber of other cybersecurity people. We all have this problem, and we're talking to the people who all know the problem but don't know how to fix it. So we got to step outside of ourselves for a moment. We got to step outside of who you voted for, right? Yeah. And we have to understand that there's inherent flaws in our system, and democracy is not perfect. And so if we understand that we have inherent flaws in our system, and how do we go to fix those inherent flaws, we get to a very, very quick thing. So where do those inherent flaws come from? Well, one, we've got career politicians. What do you mean? We've got politicians on both sides of the aisle that have been in office for 30 years. It is now their job. It is their career. It is how they make their money. So their job is to get people to vote for them. And the way they do that is they polarize you one way or another against someone else, so you see them and only see them. So they have no accountability anymore. They have no standards. They have nothing to comply with, because they can just change and adapt in a way. And we see that a lot with politicians. They flip-flop, right? Donald Trump and the presidency of President Donald J. Trump is a direct response of the American people to the establishment of career politicians. We got sick of the Clintons. We got sick of the Bushes. We got sick of the same old people that kiss babies on the campaign and say, yes, I'm going to do all these things for you. And then they get into office and nothing gets done. Nothing of what they promised gets done, or one thing gets done, and then everything else that doesn't get done is the fault of the other side and not the fault of not having conversations, right? And right now we have politicians on both sides of the aisle that are sitting in their seats that have been elected that say, we want to get a majority so we can do whatever we want without having to talk to the other side. Well, now what you're doing is you're digging trenches for both sides, right? And you're trying to do a mob rule, and nothing ever works in mob rule, right? So, and this is what we're seeing with the tech censorship is we're digging in, and we're digging in the wrong places. And this is going to have a profound impact on people, right? Over a long period of time. See, when you say to someone that you can't express your opinion here, you're oppressing that person. Now, as someone who has Israeli parents, who is Jewish, when I hear comparisons to Hitler and to Nazi Germany all the time, and everything is being compared to Nazi Germany, we're discounting the evils of Nazi Germany.
Sure.
Not everything is Nazi Germany, right? Yes. Is there propaganda? Absolutely. But there's been propaganda post-Nazi Germany, folks. There's been propaganda all the time. The Ku Klux Klan came through. That was propaganda as well. The only difference before the internet was they weren't able to reach people from the other side of the world. But now they do. They can reach anyone, anywhere, right? Yeah. So let's curtail that for a second with this whole World War II Nazi Germany thing, and understand we are in the midst where our republic, our our democratic republic is being challenged, and it's being challenged because we have a two-party system. And one side, and there's the following. One side wants a majority one-party rule. The other side wants the status quo to remain because they're happy with the status quo. And then there's the people. And now the people are saying this two-party system does not work. It no longer represents the American people.
Right. Exactly. I love it. I love it, man. You know, and I'll say something about, okay, I've got a couple of comments to make. I want to come back to something you said in the opening about the town square. Let me touch on the Nazi Germany Hitler thing, because this is sacred ground, right? There's a few things that happen in the history of humanity that should be regarded as sacred ground. And it's like, I've been called that for having an opinion, which is really, it's ridiculous, isn't it? To call just a guy that someone who barely knew me yells out Nazi, right? Or white supremacist, or these kinds of things. The reason it's sacred ground is because lest we repeat it, that's why it's sacred ground, right? It needs to be in a place where we examine these things under such a microscope accurately as possible, so that we don't repeat what has happened in the past. This is why when I read the Gulag Archipelago, and Jordan Peterson talks about this great Canadian psychologist wrote a book called 12 Rules for Life. And he says, unless you can truly understand yourself, that good and evil runs down the heart of all humans. He actually takes his class. He's a clinical psychologist, but a professor at the University of Toronto. And he takes his class through an exercise. It's a very dark exercise. Now, these are young minds, 20, 23, 2-year-olds, etc., in psychology, and takes them through an experience to show them that had they been in Nazi Germany at the time, they would likely have been a Nazi guard. Right? They would have done similar. And most people find that absolutely abhorrent. Of course, me, not me, them, that person, but not me. Once you understand that you, as a primate, as a Lord of the Flies human being, have the capability for evil, it's only then that you can fortify yourself against evil, so that if that circumstance arises, you would stand your ground. For those saying, oh, never me, those are the ones we need to worry about. So we cannot be flippant about the term, Trump's a Nazi. It's sacrilege. So that's the first thing. And when you said at the beginning of our podcast, as a reminder, this is the town square, it's an open forum, let the best idea win. Absolutely. We want the best ideas to win. And typically speaking, actually, that's called progress. And this is where we are today, because the best ideas have won since the inception of, opposable thumbs and controlling fire, let's say. And so the best ideas are winning over the long term. They might not win at times, even over the course of a generation, somebody's entire life. You might be born, let's say, in the 1900s, experience 2 world wars, near nuclear annihilation. That's progress of a kind, right? Putting somebody on the moon at the same time in that era. But occasionally, the best ideas don't win. And so now what do we do? Well, there is something to do there. And that to do is, we can agree to disagree. Now, that's a term that has been flippantly used again. But it's okay. It's actually okay to have different ideas. I'll pick on religion. That's a touchy one, right? Scientology. There are Scientologists, and lots of them. And they're a very powerful organization. And they live amongst us. We don't have to be at war, right? I think Scientology is a very bad idea. I think it's a very bad idea. I'm allowed to say that. Right?
Well, you don't like L. Ron Hubbard? Now the Scientologists are going to come on the show and be like, "You guys are evil." They're going to start following us in the streets, Eddie.
Sorry,
buddy. Bringing the L. Ron Hubbards my way. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks a lot, co-host Eddie. By the people that troll the best, right? If you haven't watched the documentary or read the book Going Clear, wow. But but my point is to say we do not need to be at war when the best idea has not come to fruition, let's say. All right, we do have a comment though. Let me read that out. People are not educated enough about Nazi Germany. Yes, thank you, Karen, for saying that. So hang on a second. It's the way too easy for them to throw stupid. This is why, right? This is why it's way too easy for them to throw stupid comments around. Yeah, Karen, you're right, and I just don't know what to do about that. Right? I mean, look, I guess this is James and I are trying to do something about it right now. That's why we put this this town hall together. Is to let the best ideas win, but also to educate, and not for us to educate others, but for all of us to educate each other. Karen, you just contributed to the platform, so thank you. Right. And you've made me realize that, yeah, you're right. This is something that we need to do as a community in educating each other and talking more about what's happened. I hope perhaps some of you hadn't heard of the Gulag Archipelago. Go read it. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, wonderful person, lived, I think, in Pennsylvania when he wrote that. Patrick, another comment. You want to go for it, James? You want to read Patrick's comment?
Go for it. All you, Eddie.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Philip Zimbrado. Yeah. TED Talks on Evil. I know this guy, the Stanford prison experiments, right? Very eye-opening. We still have to find better ways to voice our dissent. Patrick, you are absolutely right. Killing people, burning police stations or Capitol building. It's our primal Lord of the Flies and a regression, I feel. Yes, that's right.
So
yeah,
Patrick,
go on. James.
Patrick makes a great point, right? So we have to find a better way to voice our dissent. I agree, but the idea of the town square was you and I voice our dissent in the town square and the best idea wins. When you're limiting ideas and you're telling people that your idea is so stupid, right? When you deplatform the sitting president of the United States and you allow the Ayatollah of Iran that chants death to America and death to Israel, who literally talks about LGBTQ camps in Iran, of saying that, Iranian peoples have a problem with gayness because of Western culture. True tweets from this person. When you allow hashtags to trend like hang Pence or kill Trump, you kind of show a hypocrisy that loses all the marbles. And that's why Twitter stock's been down 12%. That's why so many people are leaving Twitter, and that's why I think when Parler comes back, whenever it comes back, whether it be today, tomorrow, Friday, whenever those guys are back up and running, they're going to crush Twitter because there's going to be people. See, what Twitter did now is just the beginning, but there's another aspect to this. You take a step back to go 2 steps forward. We have to get to this regression, right? Because only this regression brings about change, right? And there's been inherent things that have happened from the Capitol invasion, right? From the attack on the U.S. Capitol, from, 6 people dead, including 2 police officers, right? We had 1 police officer commit suicide. There's a GoFundMe page, by the way, for both police officers. If you want to do something good with your money, please go and donate to their families. Those families need to help. Those guys made not a lot of money. Their pension barely pays their family anything. Their life insurance barely pays their family anything. Those families need help right now. There's 2 GoFundMe pages. I'll link them in the comment section on the podcast, both on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn after the show. So if you do have some extra money and you want to donate and do something good, please go to those, give it to those families because they truly, truly need it right now, right? You've got 4 dead people that have died from this, but we've also realized that Nancy Pelosi had a laptop stolen with a bunch of national security stuff on it.
And apparently she didn't even lock the laptop when she ran away from her desk. Is that right? This is rumor.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, a mob's rushing the Capitol building. But,
number 3 in line, 2 buttons. It's locked. Anyway, sure, whatever. But you're third in line to the throne. Lock your laptop.
Well, take the stuff with you, right? There's going to be some re-education for congressmen and congresswomen and senators after this event, and you're going to see Capitol Police and a bunch of stuff change in terms of all of that stuff. But we do have a significant risk. Should have had a cable lock. Patrick says they should have had a cable.
You're in country today, man. Absolutely, that's right. Yeah.
I mean,
Korean line to the throne. Come on, there's no excuses for this one. This is why I'm putting that one on. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, and I'm trying to be as even keeled here as possible. I have no love for Nancy Pelosi. I think Nancy Pelosi held the American people hostages for 8 months for a political reason, only to come in, and we're seeing it now that they played a political. And people wonder why we don't trust the government, and people wonder why we can't really trust big tech and government and so forth. Well, here you go. Now we know why. Because they waited until January 6th, and Cuomo comes out tomorrow and he says, listen, we can't keep New York closed. We got to reopen. Hey, jerk, people have been saying that for the world's worst governor. Like, literally, this guy's got the blood of New Yorkers on his hands, bar none. He sent elderly back to the nursing home and infected the entire nursing home and literally wiped out nursing home communities. Yeah. New York's been ransacked under Cuomo and de Blasio. Yeah. They've killed small business. They're looking at their tax revenue for 2020 and 2021, and they're going, oh, wait a minute. This is really bad. Hey, jerk, no one told you that? Come on, man. Like, DeSantis in Florida is doing an excellent job. Kemp in Georgia doing an excellent job, right? Abbott in Texas doing an excellent job.
And at municipal level, I got to give a shout out. I'm in Morris County in New Jersey. My school superintendent guy, I think that's his name, superintendent, excellent job. He's against all pressure. He has not closed the schools, not closed by kids' schools. They've made massive adjustments. They've got plexiglass and masks and the whole works and visors and everything, different hours and all that. Hasn't done it because guess what? There's no evidence that it spreads in the schools. Don't want to get into that subject. We've all COVIDed out of our brains. Patrick, I'm really pleased that you brought up Philip Zimbardo's experiments there. So for those of you that haven't seen this before, Google search the Stanford prison experiments. Stanford University, Philip Zimbardo is a professor over there, put on a experiment, very much Lord of the Flies, very interesting. I'm so pleased you brought it up, Patrick. Thank you. So the genesis of it is this. What Zimbardo wanted to understand is human evil. Where does it reside in a part of our brains? Okay, this is pretty exciting stuff. I get tickled about this. And so he put an experiment together where he took volunteers who had previously signed up, students, right, of the university, postgrad students as well, doctoral students, so people who were fairly senior, 30 years old, as well, roughly 25 years old. And he divided them into two different groups on paper. One group were going to be the prisoners, the prison guards, and the other groups were going to be the inmates. And the inmates knew that they were going to be inmates, but that's all they knew. The prison guards knew they were going to be prison guards, and that's all they knew. They actually built a prison, right? A prisoner, this actual cells in a prison. And then the students who had been designated prisoners were arrested. Right? So people came to their house in uniforms. They weren't real police officers. They had to go along with it, though. They knew it was part of the thing, part of the experiment. So they came in uniform, handcuffed them in front of their families and houses, and it's like, so, okay, they know it was a setup. They know it's part of the experiment, but still kind of scary. So they put them inside these prison cells. I think the objective was to keep them detained for a week. I could be wrong, maybe 5 days or a week. They had to stop the experiment early because of the abuse, the actual physical and mental abuse that these fellow students were inflicting upon these inmate students, on their friends and other people that they knew were innocent, because the whole thing was an experiment. The whole thing was doctored up. It was being videoed. I think this was in the 80s. Philip Zimbardo has since been a star witness for various people in I remember in Cuba.
They made a movie about the Stanford experiment. There's a movie on, I think, Netflix or Amazon Prime that people if you don't want to read the book and read the experiment online, and you like to get your stuff through film, there's a movie, I think it's called the Stanford or something experiment.
Really good. I didn't even know that. I must watch it. Well, so Philip Zimbardo is also used as a star witness and to speak on behalf of people who have abused others. Now, let me caveat that. Do you remember in Guantanamo Bay, some soldiers were abusing prisoners there? Awful.
Yeah, Abu Ghraib.
We don't need to obviously state that it was awful stuff, and we all condemn it. Having said that, Philip is the guy that truly understands where that piece of crazy comes from. Because if students can do that to their fellow mates, then surely others can too, right? This is where it comes from. And this is why I say about, Patrick, you put it right there. Put up Patrick again. You're a hero today. Oh, you already did. Thank you. Exactly. Thanks. I wasn't looking at the screen. I need to move my camera slightly closer over here. All right. We should have you on at some point, Patrick. You got some good stuff there, man. So
yeah, Patrick. Yeah. We'll send you a link next week and come on the show and debate the whole fake vaccine story with us.
It'll be fun. Yeah, go on, James.
So I want to say this. They've blocked the president from all social media networks, right? What's one thing they can't block the president from doing? Text to you. So I got a text message today at 2:21 from the President of the United States, and it says the following. Statement from the President. In light of reports of more demonstrations, I urge that there must be no violence, no law breaking, and no vandalism of any kind. This is not what I stand for, and it is not what America stands for. I call on all Americans to help ease tensions and calm tempers. Thank you.
Awesome. Wow.
That goes into what this show started talking about, which is the whole idea of deep fakes and misinformation and disinformation that's happening on all these new networks that people are joining because they're looking to belong to groups. And so they're joining any group that has a picture or a name of someone they follow. And those groups now have no accountability, right? And you can't, no one can control it at this point, right? So what you've done is you've let the cat out the bag. These people are now leaving. They don't trust you anymore, right? And they've gone elsewhere. And in this elsewhere, the people who were abandoned, right, the people who were deplatformed haven't gone to those places yet. So they haven't set up an official, and those companies aren't equipped to go and say, hey, here, Mr. President, here's an official Telegram group.
Right.
Okay. This is, and when anyone looks up, President Donald J. Trump, they would see only that group.
Yeah.
And it would be an official. So none of that exists in the new ecosystem that people are going to. And deep fakes, web fakes, all these fakes are going out. They're creating this misinformation and disinformation. And the president is so deplatformed that the only way for him to communicate with the American people is through text message.
Wow. I mean, this is historic, man. And think about also, so I remember in the initial debates, his first debate against Biden started bringing up the Proud Boys in comparison to Antifa. It was such a ridiculous comparison, but everybody bought it. And Trump fell for the trap too, by the way, and said, Proud Boys stand down. Remember that? And that one, of course, went crazy. For those people that are on the fringes of, let's say, the Proud Boys, and the Proud Boys are not Antifa, they're not nothing. I mean, it's just, I hope I don't have to say that to this audience, but we can explain that a little later. Definitely put it in the comments if you disagree with me. I'd love to hear it. I want to hear disagreement, by the way. But let's say there is a fringe group of the Proud Boys. Well, now the strong man, which is what Trump is, right? He's kind of the strong man. He's a bruiser. He's a tough guy, right? He swings. He's not there to actually control those groups either. So in the absence of that communication from their, let's say, general, if you really want to have these kind of conspiracy sort of thoughts, well, now where are they going to go, right? So the people that we should be worried about, where are those people running now, right? That's a concern as well. It's disruption.
So 4chan, for those who don't know, 4chan's been around for a really long time. It's a white supremacist platform, right?
4chan.
4chan. That's what it's called. It's in fact it's hosted on public cloud. FBI knows about it. Everyone knows about 4chan, right? Okay. It is if you go there and you just read some of the conspiracy stuff that's on there and the hate that's on there, you'd be like, how is this still up? But it deserves to be up. It's the freedom of speech argument, right? If you shut them down on 4chan, they'll go somewhere else. If you shut them down somewhere else, they'll go somewhere else.
And you can't find them, and that's scary because then what are they saying?
Right.
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 You want, I'll be crude, you want the arseholes to identify themselves. You do.
Well, and you want to have the evidence, right? You want to have the online logging so that when you arrest them, you've got conspiracy. You can charge them with conspiracy too.
Right. So think of the country as a classroom. You got 30 kids. There's going to be a couple of arseholes in that classroom. You want them to be in the classroom because you can see them screaming and pulling and biting and stealing other kids' toys. Yeah, aha, there they are. But as soon as you send them to a dark corner of the classroom, it's like, what are they doing over there? They're making a bloody bomb is what they're doing over there. You should know that.
So we do that with all kinds of different things, but there comes a point in time where we have to kind of look at this in this specific way, which is you have to determine what you are. So Patrick brings up a really good point here. Excellent, because that's exactly where I was going. Aren't there limits to free speech, such as hate speech or inciting a mob? I'm no political science major because I actually want a career. I love it, Patrick. Yes, it's like a liberal arts degree. It's worth nothing.
But this is the excuse that, so you're right, Patrick, absolutely. But this is what Twitter used. Trump inciting a mob. Let's get rid of this guy.
Yeah, but they still can't find you can't find a word that said where Trump incited a mob.
So let's get into this. What is a great example of actual hate speech and inciting a mob?
So let me ask you this. Here, you know what? I'm going to use the example of Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro got, I think in 2018, he had more death threats than anyone else in the universe on Twitter.
Good Lord. And he's such a great guy. Okay, go on.
So none of that, Twitter didn't close any of those accounts. Some of those posts where they say, hey, Ben Shapiro, I hope you die or I'm going to kill you. And I'm going to come over to your house and rape your wife and kill you and kill your kids, right, are still live on Twitter. So the argument that Ben makes is it's free speech. Yes, it's disgusting speech, but it's free speech. The moment you decide to limit hate speech or incitement, right, is the moment you get rid of free speech. So Germany has this kind of thing where it's free speech minus, right? It's kind of like basic free speech, meaning you've got free speech, but you can't talk about Nazis. And you can't do the Nazi salute. And they've got a bunch of restrictions around speech in Germany, right?
Yeah.
And the problem with that is there's still Nazis in Germany, and I can prove it. I don't have my wallet next to me, Patrick, but I was wearing my Star of David about 5 years ago, and I was in Germany. And I went to a corner shop, and I bought a bunch of stuff for my hotel room, like bottles of water and all kinds of stuff. And I handed him €100 bill, and I got back a bunch of bills. And I got back like 60 some odd euros or 70 euros or whatever it is. And I was with my friend Mo, and we get back to the hotel. You know, we're putting all the food and everything we bought on the table. We're getting ready to snack and kind of just hang out. And I'm looking at the money, and I hand him the bills because he wanted to see I don't remember for whatever reason. And there was a swastika on a 20 euro bill, like a printed swastika on the bill. Now that's illegal in Germany, and I can go to the police and file a complaint against that business, and it's actually a criminal charge.
You mean they drew it in when you say print?
Like it's think of like one of those old school like
that. Yeah, so it wasn't the legal currency that did it. It wasn't that.
Right. It was someone who got a bunch of these 20 euro bills who's a Nazi, and he decided that he was going to stamp as many of those and put them in circulation. I have that bill. I, to this day, have this bill in my wallet. Right? Now, is it hate speech for someone who's Jewish to see a swastika on his bill? Yeah, I could I find it hate speech, but if I consider everything that's like that to be free speech, to be hate speech and ban it, they're going to go somewhere else and do it. I'd rather him do it to my face and know what I'm looking at than not. Right? So, we can't limit free speech.
So are you in agreement that we shouldn't have, because the limit to the First Amendment legally is hate speech and inciting a mob, isn't it? Right? In the United States, you have the First Amendment with the limit of you can't have hate speech or inciting a mob, correct? I think I'm correct in that.
I don't think so. I'm looking it up right now.
Okay, so are you saying then that there should be no limits at all? Is that what Shapiro's saying? I mean,
I think free speech is free speech.
Really, man. I tell you, I want there to be a caveat for hate and inciting a mob. I have not wrestled this down enough.
So here's the First Amendment, okay, and I'll read it off as it's written.
Okay, do that, and I'm going to Google something at the same time.
So Patrick, this is what it says. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This is the First Amendment. That's literally the entire First Amendment.
Okay.
It's not a 5,000 page bill that gives $1.5 million for lizards on treadmills.
We did that 2 weeks ago, everybody. You should, tell them about that. Because what I'm reading on Wikipedia, okay, but wait up. Exceptions to free speech in the United States refers to categories of speech that are not protected by the First Amendment. According to the Supreme Court of the United States, the U.S. Constitution protects free speech while allowing for limitations. So there are limitations, and I think that's what Patrick's getting to right there. I haven't wrestled this down to the ground enough myself, and I'm loving that we're doing it live right now because I want to know, I want concrete examples of hate speech and inciting a mob. Okay, Patrick, I'm pretty sure there's case law against inciting a riot, etc. That's right. I think that's what the Supreme Court caveats are for limiting.
So here's all the rulings against this. I've got them right in front of me. This is from the Bill of Rights Institute. It's a nonprofit. Okay, let me actually share my screen so you guys can actually see this. Here we go, folks.
And Karen wants to see your Euro bill, by the way. But
she's seen it plenty of times.
Next week, tune in next week.
All right, here's all the case laws here, and I don't know if you guys can see this. Let me try and zoom in here a little bit. There we go. So Shinak versus the U.S. freedom of speech can be limited during wartime. The government can restrict that. Abrams, the First Amendment does not protect printing leaflets urging to resist the war effort. The First Amendment did not protect an anti-war speech designed to obstruct recruiting. The Supreme Court applied protections of free speech. This is Gitlow versus New York to the states through the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment.
So there's no law. It's case by case. So you have to prove that it's hateful. See, that's really interesting. Improving that it doesn't incite mob violence is interesting to me. Hateful, it's like, it's obviously, there's a lot of things.
So here you go. This is the Brandenburg versus Ohio case. This is what's being talked about right now for the impeachment of President Trump. The Supreme Court held that the First and 14th Amendment protected speech advocating violence at a Ku Klux Klan rally because the speech did not call for imminent lawless action.
Interesting.
So this is the case. This is the case law that, the impeachment right now that we're watching, by the way, is just a waste of taxpayer time and money. It really is. It's not going to go anywhere. The guy leaves office in less than a week. The Senate doesn't reconvene until the 19th. He's not going to, and you can't impeach him based on the Constitution. You can't impeach a president after he's left office.
Yeah, it's theater. It's so silly. So I haven't, as I say, I haven't wrestled these thoughts down to the ground enough yet on hate speech and inciting violence. But what I have understood is the flip side, is when people start to limit speech, right? That's and look, Gulag Archipelago again. I'm going to come back to that theme over and over this time, aren't I? Because Stalin forbade people from much dialogue, and as soon as you do that, then you limit. Well, it's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope to putting people in jail for the things that you want, right? As soon as you start limiting people's communication.
So take a look at this case from 1997. This is, by the way, what's being used today by big tech. So the 1996 Communication Decency Act, which at the time was essentially put in place to protect phone providers, was ruled unconstitutional since it was overly broad and vague in its regulation of speech on the internet, and since it attempted to regulate indecent speech, which the First Amendment protects.
Yeah, I don't quite understand that. So the Communications Decency Act.
So you hear a lot about Section 230.
Yeah.
Section 230 is part of the Communication Decency Act.
Okay. And they're saying it's unconstitutional because it's too broad, right, in its regulation.
In its regulation. So then Congress went back and amended it to even a more broader definition today that's allowing social media to do what there is.
All right. So I think then an example of something that is not that, let's say a leader in the United States said, all right, anybody with an English accent, go get them, beat the hell out of them. Now, they're not doing the beating up, but they say to a group of people that are already incited, let's say against Englishmen, right, red coats, and oh, look, there's a guy in a red coat over there, go get him. And then that person is beaten up. That, I would think, would be a case for the Supreme Court to say that's not allowed. That a funny example, but I think I'm nailing it with that one, right? Hate speech, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think there's restrictions on hate speech. Now, if you're inciting violence or inciting a riot, and it's getting to the point where it's actual, you can be charged with a crime. I think that's a depending on what it is, it's either a felony or it's either a misdemeanor or a felony for inciting violence or conspiracy to commit. Right, Patrick? So there are laws, and there is case law around inciting a riot, but free speech trumps that. Now, if I go and I say, right, hypothetically, this is not what I'm saying, right? I'm not telling anyone to go do this, but go and beat up a person wearing a MAGA hat, and you go and do it. Can I be charged for inciting a riot or inciting violence? It's a slippery slope, right?
Right.
So what like it's one of those where it's extremely difficult and challenging to enforce that in any sort of way without really violating freedom of speech. But that's the debate of our democracy, right? So that's the whole debate of what we're talking about, right? Technology and cybersecurity all play a role in what's going on in freedom of speech. And guess what? We work in these industries. Eddie and I work. I know Patrick's in it. I know Corinne's in it, right? So we have an opportunity here, because we understand this, to really come at this from a completely different point of view. And to come at it from a different point of view is to say anything that we invent, anything that we use, there's always going to be someone that uses it for bad, right? That's why there's hackers. That's why there's a thing called cyber defense. So instead of, we don't say unhook your computers and never use them again, because there's a possibility of you getting hacked, right? So we have to use the same thing with free speech. It's free speech. We all have free speech. We can say whatever we want. I can say good things. I can say bad things. You can do the same exact thing, Eddie. Patrick can do the same thing, and anyone else watching and listening can do the same exact thing.
Yeah.
So
I think this thing's been probably debated verbatim so many times that at the end of the day, people fall back on, well, then it's just free speech in that case. Just let it go, because sometimes we need to give up the pursuit of the perfect in favor of authenticity, right? In favor of just having, as painful as life can be, all right, is just having an authentic life where I'm free to say whatever I want to say, because guess what? We want to self-identify the nice people and want to self-identify the bad people, right? And as painful as that can be for those like the Ku Klux Klan, for example, abhorrent, horrible human beings, to have them speaking in the same town square as everybody else is disgusting and revolting to me. But at least we know who they are when we let them speak. Ouch, that hurts, right?
Well,
we're reading Patrick's comment, everybody. Throw it in.
We're reading Patrick's comment. Let me put it back up here. So, when was the last time a crowd was outside of the Capitol angry about an election? This is a new case and tough to really determine what's the ruling on what happened. So, the crowd, and I think 99 point something percent of the crowd was peaceful. And there were about, I think, 200 or 300 people were the ones that really broke into the Capitol.
I know what you mean here, mate. And I think that here's my take on it, Patrick. I think that a lot of those people, the Trump supporters on that side, have been so cheesed off and disillusioned with media. They saw for 4 years the burning of various cities and media not covering it. They saw the selection of Trump's buffoonery being the headline news and not the good things that he did. And they, I think, were so disgusted that they wanted to stir the pot, I'll put that politely, and go down to DC and say, hey, elected officials. And as you were saying earlier, James, this whole two-party thing is not working. We're pissed off, and we have a good reason to be pissed off. I think that was the energy behind the crowd at the time. Now, then you get a spark of what you just said, James, which is 300, 400, 500 people who are there to, you know what, I want a selfie in Nancy Pelosi's seat, right? And then there are some people that really wanted to do a little bit of damage. I mean, I saw footage of a police officer breaking open a barrier and waving the crowd in. Come on, get past that barrier. And then, I follow the former, I followed, because I'm not on Twitter anymore, the former police commissioner of New York Police Department. And he was saying, as my professional opinion is, it was completely underpoliced. It looked to him like it was well staged to incite that kind of a excitement. So it's a complicated one, Patrick. But I hear you, man. I know what you mean, and I think it was 4 years of frustration of people saying, "I want to go down and I want to yell at people." The elected officials that are not listening to us, and the damn media who are not portraying, what is truly out there. So what we're doing is, if you think about it in the context of decades, we are living through a moment in history where the internet has essentially made media potentially obsolete. And so they pivoted into clickbait, headlines, as opposed to the sort of the Walter Cronkite type of, if we personify Walter Cronkite as the person of media that used to just speak and tell just the news. Karen saying Antifa was there as well. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry I didn't mention that. Thank you for calling that out. Antifa were there, and I've seen footage of the Proud Boys pulling Antifa away from windows at the Capitol building, by the way. So all of that is there, not being covered by the media. And so we're living through these decades of a shift in the first time in human history. It's kind of like the English language in a certain sense. So England, for all its good and bad, when it trumped all over the planet, introduced a unifying language to many different countries. And we're obviously not there yet fully, but we seem to have chosen this as the language of business, let's say. And the unification of people through language has created, it's put people on the moon, right? It makes wonderful things happen. The internet is now showing people from corners of the globe what life is like, in the Western world. This is why we saw such massive migration in European countries and the United States as well, but especially in Europe. There's a wonderful book by a bloke called Douglas Murray, called The Strange Death of Europe. I think that's the title of it, where he essentially argues, and this is a rough one, I'm going to repeat what he argues, is that Europe essentially invited their enemies into their home and allowed them to take over. Now that's extreme view, but it's very thoughtful, very well written. He's not an extremist or anything like that. But we are living in a point in history for the first time where this kind of disruption is bound to be painful. And I think that's what we saw, right? Because you're right. When was the last time a crowd gathered outside the Capitol building angry about an election?
2004.
Oh, thank you.
2005. George W. Bush was reelected. They disputed Ohio and the voting laws in Ohio. There was actual dispute by the Democrats at the time. And they objected to the certification of the state of Ohio.
To Patrick's point, though, they weren't storming the building as angry as they were. So, I mean, it's like, yes.
And again, I think that they weren't planning on storming the building. They wanted to be let through. I've seen a lot of different videos from all kinds of different people and different angles on there, right? And a good group of them were just saying, hey, we want to be able to go to the steps of the Capitol. We don't want to be 50, 20 yards away. We want to be on the steps of the Capitol. And guess what? If the doors are closed and Capitol Police allowed them to go through, that's what they did. And then it got out of control, right? Windows started getting smashed. They started going after cops. People lost their lives. There's bad things happened. And we can't ignore that. Now, does that make every single person who ever voted for President Trump a racist who wants to do a military coup? No, absolutely not. It doesn't. But that's what's being portrayed now, right? That's the narrative. And then those people are getting deplatformed and getting censored. And so now you're not healing the wounds. You're not bringing about a place where you can sit down and, what used to happen after an election is the winning side would get together with the losing side and they would try to work it to where they would find a place to work for the common good of the country. And that stopped in 2004.
Right. Yeah.
And then in 2008, we had a little bit of hope. And then that hope was crushed in 2010 at the midterms of 2010. And ever since 2010 till today, it's only gotten worse. So what do we need? And we're going to end the show here on a happy note. What do we need? We need better leaders. We need to elect better leaders. And if we don't have a good leader, we shouldn't elect them. And we should demand more from our parties.
I tell you what, mate, it's going to be an awkward meeting. You know that handoff meeting where the incoming president drives
That's
up.
Not happening.
Yeah. and then the former guy walks down with the first lady. They have a handshake. Then they sit in the Oval Office and they do that photo op. That's going to be an awkward day.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be happening because that's typically part of the inauguration. Right. So what happens is right before the inauguration, the morning of, the president-elect meets with the sitting president in the Oval to do the photo op. And then the president-elect walks through the West Wing and
it gets the briefing and all that and the photo op.
Right. And then he goes and he gets inaugurated. And right before that time, I think it's like 11:30 a.m. because the inauguration's at high noon. Trump clears out the Oval, right? And then there's a half-hour transition of the Oval.
Trump's going to leave a whoopee cushion on the chair, and he's going to wet the bed on his way out.
I don't know about that. I think, if anything, he'll probably leave a note wishing Biden good luck. That's at least what I would hope the sitting president would do, irregardless of what he thinks is, because we all know that Joe Biden's success as president is the success of our nation. So we want him to do well. We don't want him to fail. And so
that's that. Note of success. Exactly. Hey, listen, Patrick, these were great comments, man. Thank you so much. Karen, you as well. This was really cool. Next week, I really want to dig into how we might have some practical steps to protect those most vulnerable in the world. This is so important to all of us. And so I would love your comments, your interjections, your suggestions on how we might, because this is what I want to tackle to the ground next week. This is a really interesting subject. How is it people can be conned? It seems so obvious. I would hope it's so obvious for us. You don't go onto the dark web, or you don't see an advertisement, hey, you want to buy $1,000 worth of Bitcoin with getting this vaccine. It seems so obvious to me. Apparently it's not, right? Because people do fall for it. So why is that? What is it in people's heads where they can fall for a scam? And by the way, we're all susceptible to it at some point. I was on the phone to a dear friend of mine today whose WhatsApp account had been hacked. She still can't get into her WhatsApp account, which is tied to her phone number. She's just one of thousands of people at WhatsApp. She's just got to wait for WhatsApp to actually put their hand into the pile and go, oh yeah, let's cancel this account and give it back to this lady. So her WhatsApp account is still being used against her contact list. Like, I got one of these texts from her too. Hey, if you send me some money, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, that seems a little out of sorts. They didn't catch me, but they caught others. So why is that? What is it about our psychology that we can be caught? And all of us can be. I can't with that obvious stuff because of the profession that I'm in. But if I was targeted, absolutely, people would get me. So that's what I want to tackle next week. I think it's an exciting subject. Looking forward to it. Please bring your friends, associates, people who to agree, disagree, but certainly to contribute. James, close us out, my friend.
All right, guys, how to combat cyber fraud next week, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, every Wednesday to Techtown Square. Next week, you got good comments. You want to come with some stuff, we'll send you a link. If you just comment in the section, I'll send you a link to join the show. Turn on your camera, come on here, show your mug, be part of the town square. We can have up to 10 people simultaneously in the town square. So we'd love to not just have your comments, but also have you on the show. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for tuning in, folks. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Everything's going to be just fine. You know, I promise. We've seen darker days in this nation. This too shall pass. Until next time, folks, my name is James Azar, Eddie Doyle. All opinions, everything that we've said in the show today is our own opinions, do not reflect any organizations that we do work with. You do see the disclaimer on the bottom. I know we live in a world of disclaimers. I'm sorry. Until next time, folks, stay cyber safe.
Be well.